I can't put anything from someone else in my mouth because it's scary. At the entrance of my parents' house, my younger sister, 8 years younger than me, uttered these words. I had come to visit my parents' home to celebrate my sister's birthday. She forcibly took the birthday cake I brought from me. The cake hit me while still wrapped, horribly losing its shape. I couldn't believe this was happening. Seeing me covered in cake debris, my parents were holding their bellies laughing behind my sister. Shocked by the situation, I was dumbfounded, and my parents, out of breath, treated me like a stranger, just like my sister. It's because your last name has changed. If our last names are different, we're not family anymore. I never thought of being considered a stranger just because I took my husband's last name. When I questioned them, my parents looked surprised for a moment, then burst into laughter again. Kate was like a housekeeping expert from the beginning, wasn't she? We always wanted a cute child. Unfortunately, it's your fault for being ugly by nature. I felt a cold air streaming into my heart. A woman who marries into another family is a stranger now. While leaving those words, my sister grabbed the gift I had and said, "I'll take just this," contradicting herself. We plan to celebrate with family only, so please leave if you are an outsider. My mother waved me off as if shooing an animal, and I accepted the family's request. Then I announced the cessation of my financial support. I had hoped to see even a hint of worry, but my parents and sister just laughed it off as a joke. A month later, the family, now strangers to me, angrily demanded, "What is going on? Explain the situation." My name is Kate. At 28, I maintained excellent grades from elementary to high school and went on to a state university. After graduating, I was able to secure a job at a fairly well-known company. One might think I've had a smooth sailing life, but my childhood was not like that. Until the second grade, I thought we were just an ordinary, albeit not wealthy, family. The birth of my younger sister, Abby, 8 years younger than me, significantly changed my life. Delighted with their newborn, my parents began to dote on her, gradually paying less attention to me. Being ignored might have been better. But busy as they were, my parents started dumping all the household chores on me. This phenomenon is known as young carer, where children under 18 regularly handle household chores, family care, and caregiving that should be done by adults. When I first heard this term, I thought it perfectly described my situation. As soon as my mother brought Abby home, she yelled at me while I still had my school bag on. "Kate, get dinner ready as soon as you get home. Your usual cooking is so tasteless, put more effort into it." I had never been taught how to cook by my mother, and I hadn't even taken cooking classes at school yet. Knowing that saying it was impossible would only lead to scolding, I studied beginners' cookbooks I found in the library. I vividly remember being reprimanded by my parents when shells ended up in my first attempt at scrambled eggs. I was also criticized for the meals being too simple, but that was the best I could do at the time. Using ready-made and frozen meals, I somehow managed to provide decent meals, albeit continuously facing criticism. Now, as an adult, I question the dangers of letting a child cook alone. The toilet is dirty. You're old enough to clean properly now. My father would scold me harshly whenever he found even a minor dirt. General housekeeping, especially cooking, cleaning, and laundry, was my responsibility. Every morning before going to school, I would hang the laundry, and after returning, I would take it in. If it rained, it was my fault for not checking the weather forecast. Despite not being allowed to watch TV, I wondered how I was supposed to check the weather. This clearly went beyond normal chores for a child. Now I understand how abnormal it was, but back then it was considered normal, and I never questioned it. While doing the housework and envying my pampered sister, I often wished I could be like her. In that environment, I was always thinking about how to avoid being scolded and praised by my parents. As a result, I honed my housekeeping skills and was able to achieve top academic grades. However, no matter how perfectly I did the chores and excelled in my studies, I never received a word of praise from my parents. Even when I became able to cook delicious meals, I was criticized. You finally managed to make a decent meal. You really are clumsy. Even scoring full marks on a test was met with sarcasm. A smart woman is not attractive. During my last summer vacation in elementary school, my independent research was selected to represent my school at a national contest. I was excited to please my parents in a field other than housework or academics and eagerly reported it to them. However, they scolded me. What? You were wasting time on a research project? If you had that much time, couldn't you have cleaned the house and helped your parents more? By the time I graduated from middle school, I had given up on expecting praise or kind words from my parents. I simply aimed to live my days without being scolded or criticized. Seeing this, Abby gradually began to look down on me. Even as I hoped to attend university, she mocked me. You, who are bad at studying, going to university, don't make me laugh. I thought to myself that I didn't want to be told that by someone who scored 60 points at best in elementary school tests, but I never argued back. If I did, it was clear that I would face severe reprimand from my already strict parents. University costs money, you know. We'll be in trouble if you don't work and bring money home. You understand our financial situation is tough, right? It's financially impossible for you to pursue higher education. Of course, my parents strongly opposed my continuing education. If I can't get into a state university, I'll give up. But if I can get in, I can manage the tuition myself, so please allow me to go there. I pleaded and finally got permission, but life after enrolling was even more difficult. Far from helping with tuition, my parents even tried to burden me with household expenses. Despite knowing that the money I earned from part-time jobs went to my tuition, they coldly said, since you wanted to study further, it's only natural for you to support the family. If you can't manage, just quit university, they said indifferently. Afterward, I cut back on sleep to work part-time and somehow graduated from university. Because of that, I have no fond memories of my college days. I was too busy with work, household duties, and studies, unable to make even a single friend, spending my days far from the ideal campus life I had imagined. In my family home, I felt unloved, had no friends, and harbored fears of living my life needed by no one. During this time, I met someone at work who was the first to say he liked me, warming my heart. He was my senior, Brian, who was in charge of my training. After dating for about 2 years, we got married when I was 26. Initially, my parents strongly opposed it, but I somehow persuaded them, and now I live with Brian, who has become my husband. 2 years after our marriage, I usually keep my distance from my family home, but I decided to visit after a long time for my sister's birthday. I pressed the intercom at my parents' house, holding a birthday cake and a gift. "Who is it?" my sister responded jokingly. "Stop joking. I brought a cake and a gift, so open up quickly," I replied. Then, my sister burst out of the entrance, forcefully snatched the cake box from my hand, and threw it at me while I gasped in a small voice. "I can't put anything in my mouth that someone else has brought because it's scary." The cake hit me, losing its shape. Behind my sister, my parents were holding their bellies, laughing at me covered in cake debris. Look at that stranger. I just stood there dumbfounded by the shocking scene. My parents were laughing so hard they could barely breathe. "It's because your last name has changed. Having a different last name means we're no longer family." My sister joined in alienating me. I never thought about being treated as a stranger just because I took my husband's last name. "Am I no longer family?" I asked, and my parents looked confused for a moment but soon insulted me again while laughing. Kate was always like a professional in housekeeping, wasn't she? We always wanted a cute child. Unfortunately, it's your fault for being born ugly. I felt a cold wind blow through my heart at that moment. Perhaps then, any remaining affection I had for my family disappeared. My once feared parents now appeared as nothing more than pitiful, ridiculous adults. A woman who marries and goes to another family is a stranger now. Despite those words, my sister grabbed the gift I had, saying, "I'll only take this," contradicting herself. Echoing those words, my mother said. "We intend to celebrate only with family, so please leave if you are an outsider," waving her hand as if shooing an animal. "Am I no longer family?" I asked again, and my father jokingly shrugged. "Who are you? I don't understand what you're saying." For 20 years since my sister was born, I couldn't understand why I had lived trying to please such unreasonable parents. Despite having the freedom to leave, I felt pathetic for staying in such a home for so long. It was as if I had been brainwashed, though I never received official treatment. Eventually, I decided to comply with my parents' and sister's wishes. "Then, from now on, let's treat each other as strangers," I said, deciding to sever ties, and they happily high-fived each other. "Therefore, I will end my remittances. Please take note," I declared, politely greeting them and leaving the place. The three of them hurled insults and laughter at my back, but I did not look back. "She's talking about remittances. As if she's ever done that. What a liar. A young housewife can't afford to make remittances, right? It's pathetic to lie when you're in trouble. Liar. That's why you were never loved by Dad or Mom." Seeing that I wasn't looking back, they continued to hurl childish insults until I was out of sight, saying, "Stupid woman, she's too scared to look back. How embarrassing, and don't ever come back." I felt completely lighthearted. For years, I had sought affection from my family, but now that I was freed from them, I couldn't understand why their love had been so necessary. Now Brian, who always praises me despite my low self-esteem and offers unconditional love, is waiting for me at home. After washing off the cake from my clothes at a park faucet, I hurried home. Surprised to see me dirty, my husband still smiled kindly. Without asking anything, he simply urged me to take a bath immediately. His kindness in not pursuing any questions until I chose to speak struck me anew. A month later, my former family, now strangers, appeared at our home shouting angrily, "What's going on?" "Explain the situation," my mother screamed. The sound of pounding on the front door echoed. After that incident, Brian had told me not to interact with them anymore, but seeing that they weren't giving up, I reluctantly opened the door. "It must be something you've done," Kate, they claimed. "What are you talking about?" I genuinely couldn't understand. It was natural, given that they yelled without explaining anything. "I couldn't pay for my private university tuition," my sister complained. She attends a well-known private university with high prestige and departments that admit students with moderate grades. Unlike me, she never had to help at home or work part-time, and with moderate effort, she was allowed to attend tutoring. How does that mean I did something wrong? I continued the conversation calmly. Regarding that matter, university tuition was usually paid from a household account in my father's name. My parents managed the account, and I didn't know the PIN, so it was impossible for me to be involved in the payments. However, I have some guesses about the real reason the payments stopped. Before I got married, I used to deposit $500 monthly into that account. This amount didn't include food expenses, and I was continually told, Kate should pay for the food since she does the cooking, covering the food costs for 4 people with my own money. In fact, I might have been spending nearly $1,000 a month. When I decided to get married, my parents opposed it as they said, "What if we lose the person who does the chores and complained? Do you think I can work and do the housework? What if I collapse? What a heartless daughter." While showing reluctance toward my marriage, then, I managed to get marriage approval by agreeing to double the remittance. It seems my parents had completely forgotten about that promise. However, it's strange that we're running out of money even though we're living the same way as before. I decided to confront my parents with reality. Isn't it because the remittance from your daughter, who has become a stranger to you, has stopped? What? My parents and sister showed expressions of astonishment and began to look unsettled. What do you mean? Dad, weren't you earning something on the side? My mother asked my father. No way. Side jobs are prohibited at my workplace. I thought Abby was earning something from a job. Did you both forget having told me I didn't need to work? Abby retorted. It seems my mother mistook my remittances for my father's earnings, and he thought they were Abby's part-time income. Even more shocking facts came to light. But it's okay because I'm getting money from Grandpa for tuition. I was astonished to hear this statement. Despite my grandfather supporting Abby's tuition, they were still demanding money from me. My mother accidentally revealed the truth and continued talking. She had received money for tuition from my grandfather, but had spent it all on branded goods and needed additional funds. Abby and my father blamed my mother, and soon an argument broke out, but it was short-lived. My parents and sisters suddenly showed me a smile. I once deeply desired such smiles from my family, but now that I've cut ties with them, their smiles only felt unpleasant. Kate is different from Abby. She graduated from a state university. She's indeed my child. It was worth raising her strictly. That's our Kate. My parents completely changed their attitude and tried to win me over. It seems they finally understood that a substantial amount of money was needed for tuition. They dare say such things without even knowing what kind of company I work for. I have realized my childhood dream and work for a major pharmaceutical company. This allows me to earn a higher salary than the average woman, and sending $1,000 a month home was never an impossibility. However, there were times during tough periods when I had to juggle multiple jobs to send money home. Seeing me dealing with my parents and sister at the entrance, my husband suddenly opened the door with force. My surprised parents and sister froze. Enough. Kate is not your convenient tool, my husband shouted. My parents flinched for a moment but quickly retorted. What kind of language are you using to your in-laws? My father exclaimed, and my mother continued. Absolutely disgraceful. Such behavior is unacceptable. They got angry. Behind them, my sister nodded in agreement. My wife is not just a wallet to you, and you're the ones who cut ties. We have no further business with people like you. Get out, my husband declared. Overwhelmed by my husband's stern words, my parents left quietly. About my tuition, Abby murmured. It seems she was preoccupied with her own tuition issues. Anything else? My husband pressed, and with a small scream of eek, Abby also retreated with the family. However, we didn't think that they would give up so easily. They continued to come to our house and called frequently from the next day. I consistently ignored these attempts, but eventually, Abby began to obstruct my way. One day, seeing Abby in front of the entrance, I entered the house through the back door and spent time at a cafe to avoid her. But today I was spotted by Abby and couldn't escape. She approached me at a quick pace. I intended to ignore whatever she said, but I was surprised by her words and involuntarily stopped. I've always thought I was wrong. I'm sorry. My sister, who had always treated me as a stranger and insisted she was right, suddenly apologized. Mom and Dad said you were a failure, so I misunderstood you. I'm really sorry. Her apology sounded strange to me, giving me goosebumps. So, I at least want you to provide for my tuition. I didn't think she was remorseful, but her blatant request for financial support was hard to accept. Ignoring her words, I hurried home. As I did, my sister threw words of blame from behind. How narrow-minded can you be, not forgiving your sister, even when she apologizes? Her voice was loud enough to echo in the neighborhood. Perhaps she was trying to embarrass me to elicit a reaction, but I continued to ignore her and walked on. Ah, you're ignoring me? You've grown up a lot. Then I'll wreck your house. Enraged as she was being ignored, my sister intensified her threats. Better watch your way home. My friends are quick with their hands. My sister's voice grew even harsher. As I closed the front door, my sister began to pound on it violently. Honestly, I was quite scared. My sister is an adult and has a better build than me. I trembled with fear, wondering what I would do if she really attacked me. However, my sister soon had to speak to the police. Thanks to talking loudly, someone in the neighborhood had called the police. I explained the situation to the arriving officers, and the incident escalated. Neighbors also came out concerned, and the scene became tumultuous. Although my sister was taken to the police station, she was not punished as she hadn't committed any violence. The threats were there, but it was ultimately seen as a sibling quarrel. When my parents came to take responsibility for my sister, they came to my house and further escalated the situation. "You're her sister. Why did you report her to the police? This is unacceptable," my parents exclaimed. "Don't you have any affection for your sister? It's unbelievable that you would do something that could have a significant impact on her future," my mother criticized. My parents continued to criticize loudly enough for the whole neighborhood to hear. Worried about a potential call to the police, luckily, a patrolling officer noticed them first and cautioned them, forcing them to return home. I watched this scene from the window. After my parents disappeared from view, I stepped outside, and the officer informed me that they were strengthening patrols in the area. Though they couldn't intervene directly in domestic issues, the officer said with a wry smile that it was better to act before things escalated further. It was reassuring, but the police wouldn't always be there to watch over us, and there was still a chance that my family might come when they were not around. We needed to take swift action. In reality, my parents and sister continued to show up nearly every day at our home, demanding financial support for living expenses and tuition. Although we ignored them, they would cause a scene at the front door, and the police had to reprimand them multiple times. Initially concerned, our neighbors started to show signs of annoyance as the disturbances continued. My husband and I apologized to them repeatedly and mentioned that we were planning to move. We were sometimes asked about our new address, but we carefully avoided answering those questions. To prevent my family from causing trouble for others, we kept our new address as confidential as possible. The neighbors showed understanding with troubled smiles, acknowledging the inevitability of the situation. My husband and I relocated without informing our family or even the local residents of our new address. According to a neighbor we happened to meet in the city, my parents and sister continued to visit our old home even after we moved. They did not believe the explanation that we had relocated, and there were disputes with the new residents. Eventually, a settlement had to be paid, and after that, we no longer saw them around, but we were warned to remain cautious. Following local advice, my parents and sister showed up at my husband's parents' house. "Where has Kate moved?" "Because of her, we had to move into a cheap apartment," my father exclaimed. "Her actions have ruined our lives." "Tell us where she is," my mother demanded. This was a great inconvenience for my in-laws. Before we got married, I had told them about my past and the treatment I received from my family, and the potential troubles they might cause in the future. My husband had decided to marry me despite his parents' objections, but I thought we shouldn't do so without his parents' approval. Although I braced for opposition, my mother-in-law, tears streaming down her face, embraced me and said, "You've been through so much. Now that you're married to Brian, I'm your mother, so it's all right," and I couldn't hold back my tears. Even if I was alienated by my parents and sister, the warm support from my in-laws prevented me from being deeply hurt. Fully understanding my background, my in-laws firmly rejected my parents' demands. Why should we inform outsiders about our daughter-in-law's whereabouts, they stated. Nevertheless, my parents and sister showed no signs of giving up. "Give us back our daughter. We cannot allow only you to benefit from our daughter," my father shouted. "My daughter earns money, and your son is after her money too," my mother said accusingly. To this, my normally calm father-in-law grew angry. "Enough. Kate is now our daughter. You were the ones who disowned her," he stated forcefully. Chastised by my father-in-law, my parents fell silent. "Ultimately, it's you who rely on your daughter's income. We have never expected a penny from her earnings," he continued. My mother tried to justify that since my remittances stopped, they had fallen into financial difficulty and had been reckless with spending. "That's your responsibility. You decided to treat her as an outsider, so please leave," my mother-in-law dismissed them. Then, my sister pleaded for at least continued support until she graduated from college, but my in-laws, knowing I had completed my studies independently, looked at her coldly. Our daughter graduated from university on her own. She fulfilled her role as the successor without parental support, so it's only natural to expect the same from you." My sister blushed in response to the irony. Despite this, my parents and sister insisted on staying until they got the information they wanted, but finally left when my in-laws threatened to call the police. I am deeply grateful to my in-laws. After that, due to financial difficulties, the relationship between my parents and sister rapidly deteriorated. My father, already a heavy smoker, increased his smoking, which led to lung disease due to excessive spending. My mother began depending on alcohol due to stress, developing hypertension and liver disease. As medical expenses piled up, my sister refused any assistance and continued to blame our parents. The deteriorating relationship between my parents and sister led to constant quarrels, and eventually they reached a breaking point. My father and mother kicked my sister out of the house. My sister tried to return home, but my mother rejected her, saying, "I cannot have a daughter who doesn't care about her parents' illnesses to look after us." I know all this because they took turns showing up at my in-laws' house, blaming the other two, justifying themselves, and seeking help. They have been asking my in-laws to contact me. In each case, my in-laws have firmly refused. Feeling that I cannot continue to burden my in-laws, I considered planning a countermeasure when my parents and sister visited my in-laws' house together, knowing it would cause tremendous inconvenience. At the entrance of my in-laws' house, my parents and sister began crying loudly and started an emotional appeal, probably to elicit sympathy from the neighbors by showing how terribly ungrateful it was not to forgive someone who was apologizing so earnestly. This behavior, likely learned from the experience of having the police called at our previous home, was a misguided lesson. They should have learned not to cause inconvenience to others, not to switch tactics from causing a disturbance to emotional appeals. "Please stop," I finally could not endure it and raised my voice. Unable to bear their clumsy acting, I yelled at my parents and sister, who were sitting at the entrance. In fact, the place my husband and I had moved to was my in-laws' house. I was there because I knew about the repeated inconveniences caused to my in-laws by my parents and sister. "Kate, were you being held captive here?" My father grabbed my shoulder and threw an unfounded suspicion at me. "We were worried because we couldn't contact you," my mother followed, trying to approach me. It was clear my parents thought that if they acted kindly, I would comply with them again. I brushed off their hands. "I have a loving husband and understanding in-laws, so I don't need concern from strangers," I declared. This was not a physical push, but a firm rejection of their behavior. I simply declared that I had cut ties with my family. For years, I was compelled to do household chores and was used by them, but I keep telling myself that it's all in the past now. "What happened? Were you brainwashed?" My father gripped my shoulder firmly, and my mother, reaching for my face with concern, asked, "Did you receive terrible treatment? Won't you come back home? Let's live as a family of 4 again?" Abby asked me with a friendly smile, pleading for me to return. The way they insinuated that my in-laws had treated me poorly infuriated me. Yes, I was treated horribly, and maybe I was brainwashed. Then, it seemed like she was about to say something, but I interrupted my mother. "By you guys." I deliberately raised my voice, starting to recount each instance of how my family had treated me. My mother panicked, trying to stop me, and Abby became flustered, glancing around. At that moment, my father shouted, "Enough already," and waved his hand. Suddenly, a loud whistle sounded. At my husband's request, police officers had rushed over. My parents and Abby tried to dismiss it as just a minor domestic spat, saying, "Sorry, we were too harsh and I neglected my sister too much. We are family after all," using emotion and kinship as shields to seek support. However, it was clear to me. My parents and Abby only cared about money, and their apologies were merely an act. In the past, I might have easily forgiven such apologies, but having learned what true affection is from my husband and in-laws, I now understand that this is not genuine love. It was you who first threw the cake and called me a stranger, right? It was Abby who threw the cake. Abby is cold because she doesn't even care about her parents' illness, my father retorted. The moment my father disowned the sister he once doted upon triggered a dispute among the three, with them arguing, "What? You were the ones who said to kick her out and I never said that." This commotion seemed like a typical scene for my parents and sister, even leading to a physical altercation in front of the police officers. When the police officer tried to intervene, unfortunately, his cheek was struck. Initially hesitant to get involved in a domestic issue, the officer could no longer overlook the situation. Though it was an accidental strike and did not constitute obstruction of justice, it was a situation that could not be ignored. While the officer was sternly warning the family, it appeared he was receiving some communication via his radio. Afterward, he sighed deeply and requested that my parents and Abby voluntarily accompany him. It seems that a neighbor, aware of the situation, had called the police. The reported issues included loud disturbances and threatening behavior. Even though it was accidental, my parents and Abby, feeling guilty about striking the officer, complied with his request to accompany him. As they were being placed into the police vehicle, I told them, "My husband and I, along with my in-laws, have decided to move away from this place, so coming here any further is pointless." My parents and Abby tried to cling to me, but they had already been placed in the car by the police officer. We were moving because my husband was being transferred, which is why I appeared in front of my family. "No need to worry now." My mother-in-law gently patted my back as she spoke. "I thought I was going to get an ulcer." My husband, who had always opposed me standing in front of my family, finally understood and supported my decision to completely break ties after I explained it to him. My father-in-law simply nodded and smiled kindly. I deeply felt the presence of my warm family. It seems that my parents and Abby received a stern warning from the police, but they feel living in prison might be easier than the harsh life they are leading. Due to illness, my parents had to quit their jobs and could not receive proper treatment. Our grandparents' assistance for Abby's tuition was also cut off, and with no one left to rely on, Abby was expelled from university for failing to pay her tuition and not keeping her promise of an extension. After being kicked out of her father's house, Abby took a job at a casino with a dormitory in the countryside because it paid well, but she soon became addicted to gambling and spent most of her income on it. My husband and I are building a happy life in our new home, focusing on our careers. We maintain a good distance with my in-laws who live nearby, and discussions about living together are progressing. We are making choices that value both family and career. Together with my in-laws, we are pooling funds for a duplex home that is expected to be completed in about a year. After that, we hope to live happily as a family of 5.